Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to see some familiar and some non-familiar faces here. I'm very happy to see, younger people, older people also being in the same room. This is not going to be a very technical talk, so I don't think you need a level of coffee like you would normally need, but still, please go ahead. My name is Michiel. I'm online also known as MF. Long story short, it's not about motherfucker. It's a whole different conversation in that sense. Today, I would like to talk about how we're entering an era of new cypherpunks. Before I enter into this, does anybody not know what cypherpunk is? And if so, please raise your hand. See one over there, 2, 3, 4. Nice. I always love it when people don't know, because I actually get to teach something new. A lot of the people here already know a lot of things. It started a long, long time ago when people started caring more about their privacy. I think one of the first mentions in privacy being a digital right happened around the 17th century by John Locke. Back then, we had a very different perception of how privacy should be important, and it came from the Roman of being privatus, having the right to not keep your affairs public. Privacy means much more than being able to hide your messages, being able to create an environment where people cannot see you, create an environment where you can feel comfortable in your own house because you have curtains. That doesn't mean everybody needs curtains. Obviously, privacy can adjust to a lot of these information. Back then, after the 1700s, we would go fast forwards throughout the 18th and the 19th century, where more and more people started to care about privacy. As industrial revolution was happening, as people started to deal with more surveillance that was happening throughout the world, and particularly around the 18th century with Foucault, the French philosopher, talked about his prison, where if you are under constant surveillance, you are almost having this constant anxiety where you are forced to feel and take a part upon the rest of the system. It's funny that it started as a prison. And that's kind of also where today, in a world, if we would not have privacy, we would likely feel that we're constantly being watched. In 1948, we had the Big Book from 1984 being written and published regarding Big Brother and a dystopian future. I'm not sure if everybody read it. You don't need to be aware of how today's world goes. But nonetheless, the mention of Big Brother started a larger socio-economical scheme where suddenly we had the mindset, resources, and space to care about our own privacy. After the Second World War, people had a large economical relief, particularly in the West. More about the East Bloc later in that sense. And suddenly now, the common people, me, you, the people outside here, had the time to actually consider what surveillance actually meant to them. This is a picture that got taken around 1950, 1970 here in Czechia. Back then, Czechia was part of the old USSR, and they had maybe first 14 people who were photographing just bystanders, innocent people throughout the street, which rapidly grew to about 740 people who would just take hidden snapshots of you, me, in the street. They would go around, try to find information about people who might be a potential risk, people who might just be interesting or reporter or journalism. As you can see on this picture, there's nothing really out of the ordinary happening. We have people standing by, but what these people didn't know while they were just standing by in today's Prague, back then's Prague, they were being under constant surveillance. To a level where back in the 1960s, we had people coming and they would stay at a hotel, complain about not being enough towels, and then within a few minutes, there would be a maid outside with more towels. It's a very funny thing if you cannot be in your own hotel, in your own room, if you cannot express your thoughts. What else do they hear instead of just how many towels do you need? This kept evolving throughout the Cold War and until the Iron Curtain started falling, while nonetheless all of this encryption tooling and surveillance was happening on both sides of this informational war we had against the West and the East. From KGB to CIA to all the different conversations that people were having, there was a constant fear of surveillance. 1993 tops the prime age of this under the publishment of a Cypherpunk manifesto by Hughes. This manifesto bundled all of these economical, socio-economical, and technological fears we had into a very small paper caring about how we as people should stand up. A very big part that I believe, if not everybody, almost everybody will have read, Cypherpunks write code. I would love to see a hand from somebody here who has a rough idea what that means, and maybe we can give them a microphone as well shortly. Anybody has an idea what they actually intended with Cypherpunks write code? Please raise a hand. Yes, can we get a microphone here? Thank you.
I think it meant that Cypherpunks write code for cypherpunk tools, like for increasing privacy, also decentralization.
Yeah, you're completely right. Although I would argue that it is part of a much larger circle and movement instead of purely the writing code aspect. Writing code comes from a mindset back in those days where having access to computers was incredibly privileged. In the 1993s, to be able to compute proper encryption models and to be able to utilize all of this software that we were trying to write and publish, very likely it would require you to create a big computer yourself that would cost you a lot of money. It would require you to be part of some kind of a university program that would teach you about these models. It would require you having the socio-economical status of being able to go to a university program, learn about privacy, learn about code, learn about programming, and start implementing that. And back then, I would argue the majority of the people did not have that privilege, nor did they maybe even have the desire, which is a whole different conversation on itself. Now, we're in a stage of the world in the 2020s, midway, that everybody here has a computer. You have a computer, you have a computer, they have a lot of computers over there. We have one in our pocket, we have one on the stage, and there's so many other microchips being everywhere. Suddenly, having access to computers is not a privilege anymore over the past decennia. Suddenly, everybody can contribute to the Cypherpunk manifesto. If you look deeper in the manifesto itself, it would actually argue that it's more about the practical execution of ideas rather than about the actual writing code part. For the people here who do write code, I'm sure you're also very well aware that the actual time you'll spend writing code is significantly different compared to the actual time you spend on your laptop trying to figure out what you should write about. We're living in a time where people can build, and as I argue for Cypherpunks build, we take our ideas, we take our plans, and we try to manifest them into reality by actually working on them. And this can go from all different conversations. This can go from a designer making a new UI to a cryptographer making a new encryption model. It doesn't really matter that much in today's world how you contribute. The major important part is that we are contributing towards this, let's say, manifesto. Now, this manifesto, let's dive a little bit deeper into the meaning of cypherpunk and to head back to the people who raised their hands earlier. It's about 4 key topics that allow people, in my opinion, to participate in a cypherpunk movement. Having the right for private communications is something we all use. Please, who is using Signal or another encrypted messaging app, just raise your hand here. We're all using already encryption tooling. And by the use of these tooling, we're actively contributing to this system. Maybe on a very small level, but still we are all contributing by being users of tools that protect your privacy, which incentivizes other people to create tools and environments to protect your privacy. The right to have an anonymous pseudonym. Who here uses their full real name online as their username or Twitter name? I see, let's say, 10% of the people here. And I'm very happy you can do that. I'm very happy you feel comfortable in doing that. I'm also very happy for all the people who are exploring themselves, understanding who they are, what they stand for, to be able to have a space that they can create a pseudonym that they can hide behind. It acts like a shield for people, and thus it allows people to experiment. And without experiment and with the constant thoughts about being surveilled under your real name, we're just going back straight to Foucault's prison, but then in a digital world. Anti-censorship is something we hear a lot about in blockchain. Distributed networks, creating anti-censorship here and there, but the true meaning just allows you to do what you want by putting in through your own efforts. It does not necessarily mean that people need to listen to you. It does not necessarily mean that people are forced to engage with whatever media or information or tooling you create. It does mean that you can do it without it being taken apart or some kind of a government putting you into a prison for voicing your personal thoughts. Just as much, it pushes further by having systems where the data cannot be deleted as a proof of what you've done in the past. A couple of weeks, or now maybe a month and a half ago already, the mayor of Istanbul got arrested under the thoughts of having a fake university degree. Having a censorship-resistant tool system would have allowed this man to easily prove towards the rest of the public information that, oh no, I have this, without the totalitarian government being able to disprove that. And then hiding the hiding. It's a very funny phrase, I always like saying it, but being able to hide that you are hiding something is also incredibly important. Being able to create an environment that people don't need to distrust you because you are hiding something, even if the thing that you're hiding might be your bank account or your wallet, is incredibly important, as we humans tend to distrust people who are hiding something. And thus hiding the hiding, private communications, anonymity, pseudonyms, and anti-censorship resistance, it allows people to step up and vocalize themselves as a cypherpunk with these cypherpunk values. Now, you could argue, and I hear this often, and sometimes I debate with myself often as well, but what about the bad people? What about the bad people using all these tools we're building? What about the people distributing child pornography on the dark net? What about people selling guns? What about people using encrypted communications and hidden anonymous aliases to plan a terrorist attack? You're not wrong in thinking about those things. You're not wrong in arguing that there is a point in there, which is also one of the major points a lot of the governments try to go ahead and try to ban these kind of tools or environment. Nonetheless, a hammer can be used to build a house just as much as a hammer can be used to smash somebody's head in. It's all about how we use the tools. It's all about in which perspective we put things together. And sometimes the things we might morally disagree with are incredibly moral important to somebody else. And who are we to judge them based on the technology they tend to use? Of course, we should judge people on their actions, not necessarily on what they use to do those actions with. On the white hat side, we just have the journalists, politicians, developers, just teenagers who want to text with each other without their parents knowing, or without necessarily being worried that, let me send a spicy picture to my girlfriend, that you don't need to worry about this picture suddenly ending up across the whole globe. There's all these other parts of the same coin that allow people to feel safe in a digital environment where more and more people are trying to capitalize on your data and information. The more information somebody has on you, the less leverage you would have in that conversation with a person. Digital privacy and being a cypherpunk means that you can protect your own privacy, and while you do that, you help others also protect their own privacy. If we look at today's world, in my humble opinion, we kind of have an environment where we need to combine three important matters for us to be able to engage with these topics. We need to deal with institutions. As much as we don't or do like institutions, they are the ones who are controlling most of the policies we deal with today. They're the ones who set the laws, which set the other enforcement rules to follow up on those. We need to deal with the technology, which we all are here, thus I'm happy we all are doing in one way or another. We need to be able to continue the rat race of technological advancement against brute forces trying to be able to break your keys, which goes much further than just your wallet. And last but not least is also the dealing of the resources, funds in whichever way, from cash to Bitcoin to trading watermelons with your neighbor. It really doesn't matter in how you engage with the trading of all of these different utensils, but there needs to be some kind of an incentive for people to engage or to keep engaged. It has had nothing to do with needing to follow a capitalistic or socialistic system in that regard. Resources will be needed in both. Our goal, I believe, as a new cypherpunk generation, is to properly engage with all of these three. And here comes also my message for you and the people sitting here. You do not need to be only a developer or build technology to help. You do not need to be only a politician to be able to make a difference. Nor do you need to be a VC to make a difference. But all of these individuals can help to contribute to the growth of winning the rat race against utilitarian governments trying to take away what we fought hard for. Having a designer make a better UI for an existing crypto communications application could do a lot more than potentially adding another cryptographic method. While at the same time, we already need to start preparing towards the quantum-resistant technologies where we can prepare for supercomputers trying to break through in the computers we currently have. As technology advances, as we advance, so does the counterparty trying to take away our privacy. We have a chance to continue winning the fight, as we've been luckily having to be able to do, but that also requires the effort of all of us right here. Now, you might ask yourself then, how can you help? How can you participate? And how can you create an environment where you can move without necessarily feeling watched the whole time? It starts small. Talk to the people around you. Try to get them to use more privacy-friendly tooling. Try to actually start up the debate on why privacy is important for you compared to somebody else. I might have different reasons than you might have reasons yourself that you care about these things. These things can scale quite rapidly once people get involved. You can organize a small event. You can give a talk like me right here, or do it somewhere else. It doesn't always require a fancy LED wall or a nice microphone to be able to share your opinions with other people around you. Involve, for technical people, the non-technical people into your daily life, because the perspective they give you is just as important as the practical ability you give them. Try to lobby with your local lawmakers about not accepting certain regulations if you disagree with them. There's a path for everybody that they can follow and a path for everybody to continue. Here's a QR code of something you can do right now. There's a new EU regulation that is currently seeking for feedback. The EU regulation starts to try to make the keeping of metadata enforced, which means that a lot of the applications we use try to make sure you don't have any metadata, or automatically a lot of other applications are directly just not keeping the metadata for a long time. This is a very simple thing where you can just leave feedback. The European Union is always looking for feedback from people, and probably only takes you a couple of minutes. Now, am I going to stop you to leave 5 feedback messages or 10? Obviously not. At the same time, there's many more things happening. And if you really are curious into being more engaged on a political social level, this Wednesday there's another vote, there's another discussion happening regarding the updating of the GDPR, which is a whole box of worms that they're trying to open again and readjust. I thank you very much for everybody being here. I would love your questions, both now and afterwards. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed some really good Czech beers as well.
Thank you. Thank you. We have a few minutes for questions, if anyone has. Right.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a couple of questions. I'm going to try to compress them. They all have to do with the idea of hiding the hiding. And you mentioned at one point in the conversation that it's important to judge people by their actions. But at the same time, I had the impression that you were advocating for people being able to hide their actions. And so how can one judge people by their actions if their actions are hidden? That's one question. And the other question is, if that were the case, what happens to trust in a world where it's no longer possible, or it's not exactly possible, to judge people by their actions because their actions are hidden? And also, the hiding is hidden, which means there's a kind of normalization of the hiding. It's no longer, like, the hiding becomes the norm, the way that I perceive the hide the hiding thing.
Thank you for your nice question. I think it's important to differentiate the right to do something as a legal and personal right to be able to execute whatever that thing is, and the judging aspect, which is more of a personal opinion I might have about a person. Now, if a person chooses, let's say, not to share anything with them, which is their right, that doesn't mean I'll directly trust them. But the person has in their own ability to share as they like. Now, if somebody is dishonest, which is a completely different thing to being able to hide the reality, that would not let me necessarily trust this person. And if we live in a society where everybody would hide everything, which I think people are incapable of because we love sharing and oversharing things with other people, very likely we would find another way to communicate what we're trying to reach with that person. A very simple example of this is, I'm not showing everybody my bank account, and I'm also hiding the fact that my bank account is there to other people. That does not mean that you don't assume I have a bank account. So there's an underlying ideology where you have an understanding that I probably do have this thing, without the realization that it's actually there, or the confirmation on which can be acted upon as well by third parties. Let's push this maybe even a level further. If I could not hide the fact that I made a whistleblowing application to an organization, there would be an immediate retaliation. And now on the other side, if I would hide the fact that I stole money from somebody else, we're entering back the conversation of white hat, black hat, being able to use the same tools for both good and bad perspective. Somebody's actions you can still judge, because even though a person might hide a lot of their actions or their behavior, you cannot hide everything either. There's always some kind of an environment where people do things. I'm standing here, you're sitting there, the way you conversate with people and the topics you bring upon, those are still things you can make a personal judgment on a person if you would like to trust them or not. For me, the biggest differentiator is how the legal system will apply to hiding the hiding, and how they might retaliate if you would do any kind of a hiding. Because it's very easy to abuse something. Are you really hiding something, or is it just in your pocket pants and nobody can see it? I hope that kind of answered your question. And if not, we can talk later about this further as well. I'm not sure how I am in time, but I don't think there's other questions.
We still have a few minutes for questions, if anyone has any.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. You mentioned being politically active and political activism. What gives you the hope that the system can be changed from inside? Because, you know, I always felt like we need to make the technologies to actually make the nation state obsolete rather than changing it from inside. I'm not as optimistic, I guess. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that with Dor. Could you rephrase your question specifically, please?
What makes you think that we can actually change the system from inside in the long run?
Because the system is never a static system to start with. It always is changing. Everything is changing as we sit here. There are very little things in this world that are not changing. And by participating in a system, you're by definition part of the constant changing movement, and thus you have an ability to slightly nudge it towards one way or another. There's a really good book about behavioral economics called Nudge that dives deeper into how very small actions can have quite of a large effect on the people in a group. The same when you talk about, for example, the tipping point mentality from Malcolm Gladwell, if I'm not mistaken. This kind of a combination of a nudge and the awareness of a tipping point, it can allow you to provide the right nudge on the right time to try to switch towards an ideology you support in both privacy or completely other worlds in that sense. And a lot of people from the outside might seem that, you know, it's a, let's say, any given activism organization or even a normal non-profit organization. It might sometimes seem incredibly complex from the outside, but once you engage with it, often it seems way more simple and your actions can actually contribute way more. I really strongly believe comparing the nudging effect and the tipping point effect can really snowball into actions as long as you can surround yourself with similar-minded people who also want to support the tipping point you're trying to create. How exactly you can do that is case by case. From writing to speaking to doing business to organizing to designing. I think there's a lot of different ways you can try to push your nudge.
Could you build a bridge, please, between, like, how do you see cooperation between individual control and centralized control, and how could you build a bridge between these dualities and encryption?
So if I understand your question correctly, to look at corporations and the duality of individuals regarding encryption?
Pretty much, something like that.
Yeah. So I'm going to be quite honest here. I see myself as a conscious capitalist. I don't see corporations as inherently a bad thing, as long as the mission, etc., works out. Corporations are organizations of people who start working together and suddenly get access to a lot of resources, one way or another. Corporations spend a long and impressive timeline in research and developments to both create and upkeep these encryption models and find ways to apply them. I would dare to argue without corporations, which universities are some kind of corporation too, we probably would not even have access to PGP the day we know it today that build upon all the encryption models we knew later. Now, you want corporations to help the narrative, but you also don't want them to control the narrative in there. Thus, being able to lean on these corporations for their resources, which does not necessarily mean to give you a bag of cash, but could just as much be academic or any kind of templates or other resources they might publish or create, or even if they just give a grant to support academic research because it directly benefits their business. I see that as a positive thing. I see people spending money and resources and focusing their corporation effort towards a singular goal that might or might not elevate this ecosystem as a bet with something that I don't need to spend my own money on. Now, for me, the problem starts stepping in when they try to control this environment of what they create and try to enforce their own rules afterwards compared to the rules that were set at the beginning of the playground. Open source definitely helps with that. So at some point you can just fork. It does not necessarily mean that every system needs to be a distributed network, which obviously a lot of them can be. But at the same time, to kind of talk about the devil in the house of privacy, if you look at Meta and their enforcement and capitalization on WhatsApp made a huge environmental switch for a lot of people, well, suddenly my grandmother is using end-to-end encryption systems. Does that mean that I support Meta in their data collection and all the other privacy, anti-privacy, surveillance capitalism they're following? Not really. Am I very happy that they paid a lot of money to a team creating an end-to-end encryption application? Yes. Sometimes you can, separate certain actions and justify those within your own moral, while still being negative towards the general effect this thing might have. In the music industry, you often talk about separate the art from the artist. And it's an incredibly important tool. You might not ideologically agree with a person on their mentality, politics, or pure grounds, but the practical example of what they deliver is still there, and that can be neutral depending on how it's implemented.
Amazing, thank you.
Thank you so much. It's about time, and